I imagine at one time you were this brilliant little child. As we enter into adulthood, what was brilliant in childhood can actually get in the way of you living the life you want to live. Hello, friends. I'm Nancy Houston. I want to help you live a better life. We're all emotional creatures who sometimes think. And so it's so important that we make this journey from our heads into the depths of our hearts. Welcome to the In-Between with Nancy Houston. Hey, hello, my friends. I am so glad that you are here with us. Thank you for joining us. I know that your time is precious and that you've got things to do and places to go. So I always consider it an honor when you will take some time out and be with us, listen with us. And my goal is for us to provide value to your life, things that would make a difference for your life and help you live a better life. Because, that's what this podcast is about. We want to help people live better lives. And so that's the goal. That's the desire. That's what we're here for. And we'd always love to hear from you if there are things that you feel like would help you actually live a better life. Life is complicated and relationships are complicated. And I'm so aware of how complicated relationships can be, especially around the holidays. Just last week when we were, preparing for Thanksgiving and doing all the things, we've got a hiccup in our family that happened about a year ago, and I don't feel like we've completely recovered from it. And so my husband and I just had to spend some time grieving about that and figuring out how we want to handle that without trying to fix it or control it or make it all better, but giving everybody the space they need and leaning in to the places we need to lean into. So I think one of the hardest things that can happen to us is when we stop trusting each other. And let's face it, trust is really hard. And when we stop trusting each other or we don't like the decision somebody's made, it's so easy to just start judging them or maybe to judge ourselves harshly. And if there's anything you take away from this podcast, I hope it is this one thing. Harshness helps nothing. Harshness won't ever make anything better. It won't make you a better human. It won't make you perform better in the long run. It won't heal anything. So harshness heals nothing. But you know what does? A lot of empathy and a lot of compassion actually heal things. So I just wanted to say if you're having some hiccups in your families around the holidays, that's normal. If you're having extra stress because of the holidays, you're normal. And I hope that during this holiday season, you will be especially kind to yourself and have a lot of grace for yourself. So today, I really wanted to talk about trust because trust is really difficult. It's hard to trust when the fear centers of our brain have taken over, because you know what happens when the fear center of our brain happens? So this is the amygdala, and it is the fear center of your brain. It's in the mid to lower range of your brain, and it honestly can take over. And when it does, it starts scanning 4 times a second to see if you are safe or not. Can you imagine your brain scanning, having to work that hard to determine if you are safe or not? So that's 4 times a second. That's a lot, right? That's every 15 seconds, milliseconds, it's scanning. Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And this is where anxiety builds. This is where some of our even paranoia can build. And this is where we can start transferring some of our anxiety onto others. Like, oh, they hate me. I said the wrong thing. I shouldn't have said that. We can really condemn ourselves and judge ourselves really harshly, or we can judge other people harshly. And we can judge our motives. We can start thinking the worst about them. we can start thinking to myself, I cannot trust this person. This person is not trustworthy. And maybe they are, and maybe they aren't. Maybe they made a human mistake, which we all do. Maybe they dropped the ball. Maybe they're stressed out. Or maybe they're truly an untrustworthy person. And that's something we always have to pause and try to determine. Is this person truly untrustworthy? Or are they human and fallible, and they make mistakes and they say stupid things just like me, because we're all human, right? So again, trust is hard. And when the fear center of our brain takes over, we are not in a good place to determine if somebody is safe or not. Erik Erikson was an American psychologist who made significant contributions to the field of developmental psychology. He is most famous for his stage theory on psychosocial development. So he's helped us all so much in our field understand what is supposed to be happening in each stage of development for the child. So he wrote extensively on that. And his first one, the first thing, our very first developmental task is trust versus mistrust. And man, that happens from the ages of 0 to 2 years old. It's not a lot of time. A lot can happen for many of us between the ages of 0 and 2. And then we can wonder, why do I have such a hard time trusting other people? Why can't I trust my wife? She's a really good woman. Why don't I trust her? For my husband and I remember one time asking his mom, he's one of 7 kids. The woman had a lot of kids, so when I tell you this story, I'm not standing in judgment of her because she had a lot going on. She also ran a daycare in her home, and she also took in foster kids. So in many ways, this woman was a complete rock star, believe me. But I asked her one time, she said to me after I'd had a baby, and she said, well, all my kids slept through the night at 6 weeks old. And I said to her, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. How did you do that? And she says, well, I'd put them in a room at the other end of the house and close the door and walk away. And I'm like, wow, I could never do that to my kid. But we have to understand that was a different generation and a different time. And that was the parenting advice that a lot of parents got. You put your kid, that infant, in that crib, and you walk away and you go get him 8 hours later. And I'm like, I can't imagine how much my husband must have screamed through the night when he was hungry or wet or just needed some reassuring arms put around him. So trust is something that we've had to really work on. I remember we've been married almost 50 years. So it's a long time, right? So I remember 20 years ago, it finally just dawned on me, he doesn't trust me. And so I sat down with him and I'm like, honey, I know I'm human. I know you are not married to a perfect human because there is not one. So I'm perfectly aware that you're married to a flawed human. But have I done anything to cause you not to trust me? Can you think of some things that have caused you not to trust me? And he thought, and he said, no. And I'm like, and yet I feel like you don't trust me. So tell me about that. And he really didn't have words for it. But as I understand, and as I gain knowledge about child development, I understood that trust versus mistrust was meant to be happening in the first 2 years of his life. And it wasn't happening. Sometimes it was probably happening really well for him. But if you think that from 6 weeks on, he was put in a room and the doors closed and he was walked away from, that did not build trust inside of my husband. So he ended up not being really wired to trust. And really it was mostly he was depending on his mommy to come and get him when he needed her. And mommy wasn't showing up for him. So even before he was verbal, even before he had words, he was learning how actually not to trust a woman. So, that's been a big thing for us. One of my first memories was when I was 3 years old. And to this day, this memory will make me sad. You'll probably feel sad. It's a sad story, so I get a little teary when I tell it. So I've got my Kleenex ready, though, somewhere here. Julie and Hector are smiling at me like, here she goes. Okay, here I go. So my first memory was I had a little brother, John, who was like 2.5 years younger than me. And I remember one Saturday morning, I heard my brother would rock the crib. And I don't understand this, but we lived in a house with wood floors. The crib had wheels on the bottom of it. So if he would rock the crib, he would inch it over till it was banging against the wall, which, would drive any parent crazy, right? So I heard my dad go into his bedroom and he beat my little brother in the crib. My brother was probably all of 6 months old. And I remember thinking, if that was my baby, I would go get that baby and put him in his stroller and get him as far away from that bad man as I could get him. So, I'm like, and so I was raised in a house where I don't know if those things happened to me, but I imagine if I was disruptive, those things did happen to me. And so I wasn't exactly learning how to trust either. And so here's my hubby who's learning not to trust a woman because she doesn't have the energy to always come and get him. And I have empathy for her. I'm not judging her. And my dad was being a violent man. And so, you can imagine the trust issues that we have had to work through, even though in our own marriage, those are things we just came into our marriage with. Like, thankfully, we honestly haven't. I'm sure we've done little things that make us wonder, like, really? You bought that today? But there haven't been big breaches of trust for the two of us. We've really worked on being trusting for each other, probably because we knew that we already came in with enough trust issues. But trust is hard. Trust is hard. And so I've worked with lots of couples where there's been infidelities, where they've caught each other doing things that don't build trust. And so maybe you came from families where there was trust, but then you get into a relationship where it creates a lot of distrust. And so now trust is hard for you as well. So, we're never done growing and developing. It's a forever deal, right? Adult development says, that's why I love adult development, because it says we're never done growing. We're never done. We're not finished. So please remember that. So no matter how trust went for you from 0 to 2, even if it went really, really, really badly, please know that you can still rewire that part of your brain. Or if it went great, but then you've been in some relationships that have caused a lot of distrust, or maybe you've worked at companies where things happened that felt really wrong to you. Maybe you've learned some mistrust and distrust, and know that you can still rewire that part of your brain even as an adult. So the inability to trust others or ourselves makes every relationship super stressful. And, I love relationships, and I'm all about really helping everybody who listens, who's in our community, have better relationships. Because you guys, we live in this very individualistic world, and yet that's a myth. We have an us brain. We need each other. We need healthy relationships. We are never going to be happy or the humans we are meant to be if we are trying to do this life alone. You are not meant for isolation. And then what I see more and more of is people just spending time isolating with porn, and that can feel like, well, I'm connecting. I'm like, no, you're not. You're not connecting to another human brain. You're connecting to an image, and there's a difference. Or, like my friend, I've had a couple of friends call me just this week, like, hey, I've caught my teen daughter like reading pornographic stuff, and they're just heartbroken. And I'm like, we're living in a world that's telling our teens and adults that, hey, this is the way to bring happiness to yourself. And it's not bringing any happiness. It just brings more and more emptiness, because we all need humans. And in some ways, we share a brain with each other. So we need the mirror neurons. Like, I love Julie's here with me today. Hector's here with me today. Their brains make me happy because we get to connect with each other. And their mirror neurons bring happiness to mine, and my mirror neurons bring happiness to their brains. And then we can all leave here with happier brains. So we're made for connection. But when there's trust issues, we actually start making our relationships super stressful. The inability to trust others or yourself makes things so stressful. If you're raised in a home that is rigid or religious, those homes tend to produce more addictions. And if you're in a home where you're living with an addict, addicts teach us not to trust ourselves. So, for example, my dad was an alcoholic. So I'd say to my mom, Mom, is like Daddy sick? And she'd say, oh, no, honey, he's not sick. And honestly, an honest answer would have been, he's hungover. Because I'm looking at Daddy and I'm thinking, he's sick. She's saying, no, Daddy's not sick. So it builds a distrust in the child to trust their own gut, right? So sometimes I have a hard time trusting my own gut. And so, Hector, I'll do this to you. Like, well, Hector, what do you think? And it probably comes from some of that, because I was taught, don't trust your gut's off, because I would ask questions and the answers weren't truthful. So I thought, well, I can't trust me. I must be off somewhere. My gut must be off. And I've had to really, keep practicing, like, Nancy, pause, see what your gut says, trust your gut. See what you need, trust your gut. Learn how to trust yourself. So when a child isn't given a sense of safety, warmth, and available nurturance, the child learns to adapt and find ways to survive. So the way my hubby did that was, he's like, fine, I don't need you anyway, with his mom and his family. Like, I'll just figure out life by myself. So, man, as young as he could, he got a bicycle. When he got older, he got a motorcycle, he got a horse. So he could just take off and get away from his family and be alone, because he actually just felt safer being by himself and going into the woods and getting lost in the woods. I had other ways that I adapted, like, how can I please and appease and soothe and smooth my very angry, upset dad? So we developed different ways of adapting, but we both figured out brilliant ways to adapt. I know that you've done the same thing. Children are clever. Children are survivors. Children figure out ways to adapt to their environments so they can stay safe and they can survive. The thing is, when we're living in our adaptive childhood, in our adaptive child, eventually that's going to become maladaptive. So, for example, if my husband still wanted to just take off, he has a motorcycle, but if he still just wanted to take off all the time and go live in the woods by himself, that would not make for a happy marriage. That would be completely maladaptive. If I think that it's my job to soothe and smooth him every time he's upset, honestly, I'm going to grow to resent him, right? So those things that work for us in childhood are maladaptive now in adulthood. And so we've all got to realize that, take that child on your lap, take that adaptive child on your lap and say, hey, babe, thank you that you were smart and you were creative and you were figuring out how to survive. And now that's no longer working for you. So thank you. And now I want you to know I, the wise adult, will drive this car so you can get in the back seat and play a game or play a video game or read a book or color. You don't have to be in charge anymore. Because listen, when we're functioning out of our adaptive child, here's what we do. We become black and white thinkers. Everything's right, everything's wrong. Everything's black, everything's white. And that's just not adult life, right? The adult world is full of gray and is multidimensional. So when we're stuck in our adaptive child, we are not flexible. We become rigid. I had one client say, oh, my adaptive child is like a rigid little fundamentalist, right? I don't mean that in an offensive way, but that's how we all can become when we're in our adaptive child. We have a really big need to be right. So we will fight to the death to prove that we are right. So therefore, we become super defensive. We become super controlling. We stonewall others because, no, I'm right. So we can't listen. We don't give them a voice. We don't know how to share power. We can't relax. We're uptight. Our bodies are tense, especially through the shoulders. It's just our bodies aren't happy. We cause ourselves a lot of illness, and we tend to either avoid conflict. And the latest research is saying that like men who avoid conflict have way higher prostate cancer numbers than those who learn how to talk about their feelings, who aren't conflict avoidant. It is so important that we as adults learn how to work through conflict because you know what? The adult life is full of conflict. So if we can learn how to do that and do that well with each other without being hateful, without being black and white, without being I'm right, you're wrong, I'm smart, you're stupid, I'm brilliant, you're ignorant, oh, if only they knew what I knew. None of those relational stances help us have better relationships. They actually destroy a lot of our relationships, and I don't want that for me, and I sure as heck don't want that for any of you. We either avoid conflict and withdraw, or we blow up and we lose it. How many times have you thought to yourself, okay, I'm not going to do either one of those. I'm going to be calm and cool. I'm not going to yell at my kid today. I'm not going to be testy with my spouse today. I'm not going to hate my boss today. How many times have all of us thought that? And yet, next thing we know, we are either withdrawing and seething with resentment, or we are blowing up and exploding on people. We all know that none of those things work, and yet when we're in our adaptive child, that's going to be our go-to moves. So listen, your life is too precious to live this way. Your life is way too precious to live this way. Resentment will eat you up, as will attempting to control others, because honestly, you have no power to control others. Even your 2-year-old, right? And people become very angry when they believe they're meant to be able to control things, and they can't. They are filled with seething anger and resentments. When we're being rigid, when we're uptight, when we're withdrawing or blowing up, none of these things add value to our lives or the people's lives around us. So what's the solution? Hey, I want to check in with Hector and Julie, see if they have any thoughts or questions first. Guys, keep rolling. Okay, so What's a solution? I've talked a lot about what doesn't work because I think, honestly, we got to really realize that, man, we all have relational problems and we all have trust issues. And I just want to normalize that. And please don't hunt the bad guy. You're not a bad guy because you have trust issues. You're not a bad person because you have trust issues. It probably got established in you before you were verbal. Things probably happened in your life before you had any say, before you had any vote in it. So please be compassionate towards yourself, okay? If you are compassionate and if you can be kind and empathic towards yourself, you are more likely to rewire this part of your brain. If you're harsh and judgmental and condemning of yourself or others, I'm just going to tell you now, the potential for changing this is about zero. So let's all try something different. Hey, if what you're doing isn't working, let's just try something different, right? What could it hurt? So I want you to join me and let's all just, let's all maybe make a commitment like, what the heck, I'm going to try something different. So I think Jesus invites us to a different way of doing life. I woke up like at 3:30 this morning. I think I must have been anxious about some things my husband and I talked about before bed. I don't think it's a good idea to have money conversations before you go to bed, or work conversations or heavy conversations before you go to bed, because then your subconscious will wake you up in the middle of the night processing like crazy. That's what happened to me. But I put myself back to sleep when I started just rehearsing this scripture. It's Proverbs 3:5-6, and it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit. And I like to add, and surrender to him, and he'll make your path straight. So I think God is saying so much to us through this scripture. Like, you don't have to figure this all out on your own. You're not on your own. And God is 100% trustworthy. Like he says, I'm like a mother hen, and I gather my chicks up and I hold you close to me. It's like a picture of a trustworthy mama, right? So if you didn't have a trustworthy mama, or your mom wasn't warm and available, God wants to be a warm mama to you. He also says, like, you're the apple of my eye. So remember that. You're the apple of his eye. So he just freaking really enjoys you. He delights in you. You are precious to him. And so, of course, he wants to give you his time and attention and prove to you that he's trustworthy. Another thing he does is he compares himself to a nursing mother. So you men aren't going to get this. And if you haven't breastfed a baby, you won't get this. But if you've breastfed a baby, and man, when those breasts fill up with milk, you're like, where's the baby? Right? You'll go wake the baby and like, hey, baby, you got to eat because I'm going to bust. And so, God says that about himself. He's like a breastfeeding mother. He can't forget you. He can't walk off and leave you. He can't do it. It's not in his nature. And I think what happens to most of us, if trust did not go well, so we learned mistrust, then we tend to transfer all that mistrust onto God, and we think, I can't trust him either. So I think that's why we've even got to wire that part of us. We've got to start like learning, like, no, God is trustworthy and God is good. And he says, trust in me, trust in me with all your heart. And don't lean into your own understanding. You don't have to figure out anything on your own. And if you'll submit yourself to me, if you'll surrender, I will help you and I will lead you. So I think that can be one passage of thousands that can kind of like stabilize us when we're feeling topsy-turvy, when we're feeling uncontained, when we're feeling afraid and uncertain. That God just wants to hold you and still you. So when we can move into our wise adult, and I think if we'll get still with God, that then I know for me, if I'll get still with him and let him center me and remind me of who he is and how good he is, then I can move into my wise adult. And then I can learn how to trust and relax and be flexible. And I can give up my need to be right. And then we don't have to rely on our own opinions. We can learn how to rely on God to guide us, love us, and hold us. He wants to lead you in every decision you need to make. You might just be like me today, where you feel like, you know what, I think there's about 10 decisions I need to make today. It can sometimes feel a little overwhelming. But if I'm letting God guide me and lead me and help me, it's okay. So God wants to do that with you today. You realize you're no longer alone. You no longer have to figure it all out by yourself. You can relax and trust that he is for you. If you'll become intimate with him in all you do, he promises he will lead you everywhere you go. So I just want to say, hey, pause. Wherever you're at with the Lord, if you've given up on him, he hasn't given up on you. If you've walked away from him, he hasn't walked away from you. He can't. He won't. So he's right there. He's just there like a mama who wants to hold you, put you under her wing, honestly, like take you to her breast and feed you. I mean, that's what God says he is for you. That might be a little too much for you, but I'm just saying, right? I'm just saying that's who God says he is for you, right? And who doesn't want a warm, loving mama, right? So we can stop thinking that we need to know it all. God, right? Give your mind a freaking break. You do not have to figure out everything. You've got a partner. Be willing to be corrected. If your relational stance is to be high and mighty, because remember, that's what shame does. Shame either turns us into kind of know-it-alls or less than. I'm either high and mighty or I'm less than everybody and I'm dirt. And I eat worms and I eat dirt. And neither one of those are healthy. That's the voice of shame. So if you've gone high and you have a need to know it all, hey, just give yourself a hand down today. If you've gone low and think you're less than everybody, give yourself a hand up today, would ya? And you know what? Most of us do both. In some ways we go high, other ways we go low. And I just want you to remember that's a voice of shame. And sometimes you just have to talk back to shame and say, shame, you're a liar. And shame, you're a thief and you want to steal everything good from me. And don't keep giving shame that kind of power over your life. Talk back. Give it a little crap, okay? When you live like this, your relationships will improve. Your heart will soften. You'll learn how to trust and you'll become less defensive. Did you know that all the marital research shows that defensiveness is the number one cause of divorce? So I don't know if you'd like to stay married to the person you're married to. I would highly recommend that you work on letting go of defensiveness. You know, marriage is meant to be at least somewhat iron sharpening iron. So your spouse may actually have some wisdom for you. Now, they may be a real jerk. I don't know. I don't know who you're married to, but you know, sometimes we can think our spouse is a real jerk when we can all put down our defensiveness. Maybe they actually have something that might even be 1% true. And if it's 1% true, maybe there's something there I could learn from and take away from it, right? Why not? So remember that When we know we're loved children, the Father corrects us and challenges us. You know, if he wasn't a daddy to you, he wouldn't correct you. He wouldn't bother. But good parents correct their kids. Good parents remind us that we actually don't know it all. Know-it-alls are a pain in the rear to everybody. You know, so we're a pain in the rear to ourselves when we think I've got to know it all. You don't have to know it all. There's lots of people around you who want to help you. I believe that honestly, the universe wants to help you if we'll believe that. If we'll start trusting that there's so much good in the world, yes, there's bad, but there's more good than there's bad. And if we'll start believing that, I believe that we'll see more good things come to us, you know? And then we'll start experiencing a fuller life. So soften your stance. Learn how to share relational power. Learn to ask for it and listen to feedback. Maybe ask your person, like, how am I showing up in this relationship? You might learn something, right? Trust is a gift. It's a gift we have to learn how to receive and a gift we give. Whenever we question somebody's trustworthiness, we have to know that is very hurtful and that most people become highly defensive automatically. So instead of questioning other people's motives, turn your complaints into requests. For example, instead of saying, I can't trust you, what if you said, hey, would you help me? Sometimes I have trust issues. Sometimes I struggle with trust. And I need to know I can count on you. You said you'd be here at 2 today. It would really help me with my trust issues if you did show up at 2. Would you do that for me? Do you hear the difference? The first one's a complaint and an accusation. I can't trust you, which gets us nowhere, cuts off conversation, cuts off possibilities that we could actually build some trust. Where the second one is you turn it into a request and it actually is building a bridge. Hey, would you help me? I can have trust issues. I can struggle with trust. You said you'd show up at 2 today. It would mean so much to me and it would really help me if you came at 2. Would you help me with that? Most people want to help you. Most people would show up at 2. But let's say if they do, then it's a win for you both. You both win today. If they don't do it, it's still a win for you because number 1, you're learning to ask for what you need. Number 2, you are owning your trust issues, which I think we all have. Number 3, you're turning complaints, which are counterproductive, into requests. And it's a very wise adult thing to do. So you won, even if the person didn't show up at 2 o'clock. Trust can be learned. Adult development teaches us we're never stuck where we started and that rewiring our brains so we can live a more productive, happier life is 100% possible. Isn't that amazing? So learn to create pauses so you can purposely move from your adaptive, reactive child into your wise adult self. You have a wise adult within you. It just needs to be cultivated and helped. And remember, when you are acting from your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, you aren't bringing your best self to your brain. You need to pause so you can reconnect with this prefrontal cortex, which is the wise part of your brain. This is where the adult part of you lives, is in this front, beautiful part of your brain. It's amazing. So take time to reconnect, pause. You can go to that fear center faster than you can bat your eyelashes. So just learn to take pauses throughout your day. Take a few deep breaths. Ask okay, what's going on with me before I start barking at my wife, before I get all up in her grill, before I get defensive, before I start going off with unbridled self-expression. Good Lord, do we live in a world of unbridled self-expression where people can think, well, I have a right to say whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want? It's like, really? That's not the wise adult. That's the adaptive child going off. So let's just all learn how to pause. Let's take a moment. And most importantly, hey, would you all take that adaptive child into your lap today and give him or her some love? Appreciate all that child has done for you, that they got you through, and that you survived and that you are alive today because of that kid. And then would you remind that child that actually they get to be a kid now, because now there actually is an adult who is for them. And that adult is you. Unburden that sweet child from the heavy load that they've been perhaps carrying for nearly a lifetime. Say, hey, kiddo, guess what? You don't have to be the little adult anymore. You don't have to be the little parent. You don't have to be the little princess. You don't have to be the family hero. You don't have to be the scapegoat. Those are all unhealthy family roles that you had to adapt to survive. You don't have to do any of that anymore. You don't even have to be the wild rebel. You can now settle into this wise adult, and you can start belonging to you. You can come home to love. And guess where love resides? It resides here. That's the good news. Love resides inside of you. Sometimes we just have to slow down enough. Stop hating ourselves long enough. Stop being full of contempt and judgments and self-hatred long enough to realize that love resides right here and that God is for you and he loves you like crazy. You are the apple of his eye after all. So remember, he's holding you, he is guiding you, he is loving you, and that you're enough and that you deserve an amazing life. So obviously, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So, yeah, Hector, Julie, anything you guys want to add to that? Any thoughts? Nope, they're giving me the nod. Okay, everybody. Hey, I love you. Thanks for being with us today, and blessings on you. Go forth and love that adaptive kid inside of you and keep connecting to that wise adult, because wisdom lives inside of you, and so does love. Thanks for being with us today.